So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's Twitter Spaces. It's all about being an effective leader, particularly in a remote working environment. So, we've had a few questions come in, all about remote working, remote leadership, remote management, all of these different things. So, I'll just start asking the questions if that's good for you, Kirsty, and we'll just have a bit of a back and forth about it.
Sounds great.
Fab. So the first one is, how do you define remote leadership and how is this different to remote management?
I think this is really huge, actually. So from my perspective, and every business is different, but I think the key differentiator with working and leading remote teams is it requires way more trust, like huge amounts of trust. The benefit, obviously, of being a remote team is you get increased autonomy, you get a little bit more flexibility around schedules, and obviously more and more people now are allowing people to work all over the world. So actually, I think remote management doesn't really exist so much. It really is about remote leadership in terms of guiding your team to identify their needs, supporting them, making sure that they're not lonely and they feel psychologically safe and supported. But I certainly think the days of really trying to manage a team in terms of their tasks is ebbing away. And it's really more about building the teams in advance that you know that you can trust, I think is the key distinction for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, I think management skills is very much focused on things like processes, procedures, budgets, like all of the really important like stuff, like the work stuff. But leadership is really focused more on like people and that influence, vision, the direction. And they're both like really valuable skill sets. And like from what I've seen, not all great leaders are great management, like great managers, and vice versa. But I think when it comes to being remote in particular, that leadership, that connecting with the team and being able to focus on them more so than, say, a process or like, all of these other things that come with that is so much more vital to productivity and motivation and building that trust as well, like you said.
Yeah, totally. And I think I would agree with that. I think I'm a good leader and an absolutely shocking manager. I'm not detail orientated at all. And I think this is where it's really nice when you think about the different people you have within a business. So, when I was running Many Minds, I had like ops people beneath me because I was really good at like getting buy-in, getting trust, getting people excited. But when it came to like managing processes and looking at the detail of the work, that's just not my remit. And I think sometimes we think that is what being a leader is, whereas I think it's really not the case. And I think sometimes we tend to think of good leaders as like telling the team how great they're doing, but actually that's not it either. It's really about helping people feel for themselves and work out in their own ways the things that they're doing well and finding out their own solutions. And it's a different skill, and it's a real skill actually that you have to learn, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, it's not easy, that leadership skill, and it's something you have to develop over time. And because I think everyone focuses on it as a management perspective of, okay, if I just tell people what to do and these are the tasks that you have to complete and how long have you spent on this, that's not leadership. Like you're saying, it is that direction and it is like investing in people more so.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Cool. So in terms of challenges then, what are like the most common challenges employees face when working remotely, and how can these really be overcome?
Yeah, so hi Emma. So it depends on the individual. So I think some employees really thrive working remotely. I think some employees really, really struggle working remotely. And so I think when we think about building remote cultures, we have to take this into account, that actually there's going to be huge amounts of difference. And a lot of businesses maybe now are moving more into like hybrid models and things. It's really about acknowledging that some people really do thrive, like working remotely, working from home, having no distractions, no meetings. Other people actually really struggle with it. And there really isn't a right or a wrong. So it's thinking about how the business can account for those differences, especially so pretty much everyone in my team at Many Minds had kids. I think like everyone actually in the Many Minds team had children, which was something I really prided myself on, because when I founded Many Minds in 2015, that was really when remote working wasn't seen as a viable option for many businesses, like serious businesses. And we were working with like big brands, and a lot of our clients I would have to like not hide it from, but have to really like project that more structured traditional agency model. But it doesn't necessarily work for parents, it doesn't necessarily work for introverts. So I think to get back to your original question, I think what employees can struggle with is it depends on who you are. I think loneliness is a real thing, feeling like you have a lack of connection. Like culturally, that's what employees can struggle with. And then there's lots and lots of like management and like leadership struggles as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, one of the biggest challenges, like you say, that I've seen from my team has been a sense of isolation. So people feel at times maybe it's just them and their screen all day. So that's why
Because it
really
is.
employee. Yeah, exactly. No, it's true. And that's why things like those employee focused social events, even if it's on a Zoom call, is so important. Just kind of that regularly checking in, having a general chit chat that you would normally have, say, over a water cooler or something like that you just have, maybe just picking up the phone really quick and just like, hey, how are you? How was your weekend? And just having that kind of back and forth to not get rid of the loneliness, but really just help to combat that.
Yeah, and just acknowledging it as well. Just acknowledging that it can feel really isolating and lonely. So what we used to do was we'd get together once a month, and the benefit of being remote is you don't have an office. And actually research on creativity has shown that we're more creative and we do a better job when we have lots of novel stimuli. So working in the same building, in the same place at the same day actually isn't, neurologically speaking, that great for our innovation. Like there's lots of other really good benefits. So I think one of the brilliant benefits of being remote that I used to really enjoy, like just as a leader, it was fun. I used to just hire different silly fun meeting rooms every month, like, and we'd get together in a fun, different, new space. So that's a really nice thing to do, thinking about how you can take the fact that maybe some businesses you don't have a central premise, maybe you do, but you're using it less, and thinking about how you can increase novelty, because when you can increase novelty within a business, you also increase creativity. And that's like fact, that's research based. So I think that's one of the real benefits of being remote, that actually you can mix things up. Yeah, I think that is my answer.
No, it is completely correct as well, because I mean, since Absolute became remote, I mean, we first went remote at the start of the first lockdown. It was only going to be for what we thought was going to be 3 weeks, and now we're a fully remote agency forever, and it's amazing. But all of the events and stuff that we do virtually is completely different. I think the other day we did an I'm a Celebrity themed event where we all get this like really cool box, like this novelty box, and we had to build like tents in our homes and all weird stuff like that we would never do when we was in the office before, and it was just so much fun because it's so different.
Yeah, it does create a lot of space for that. And it's also, again, and I think this is something that agencies aren't great at generally. Agency teams tend to be, because, I don't know, broadly speaking, agency teams tend to be a little bit younger. So I think what a lot of agency businesses are great at is bringing like fun and energy into businesses. But what they're not so great at is creating and facilitating, and maybe it's changing, but like creating and facilitating space for maybe the people who don't want to like party on Zoom, and thinking about how you can build those cultures and create those cultures outside of like the go-to things like that. Like, like, I don't know, you do fitness classes, don't you, and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. We've got fitness classes, wellness days now as well. So all of these different things. Yeah. Cool. Amazing. So along the same kind of lines then, how important are mental health initiatives for teams that work remotely?
This is such an interesting question, because I think it's very important. I think it's really, really important that companies are mindful of the impact that work can have on our stress and put in provisions to look after people and take care of their team. But I really do think it's like a two-way thing. I think also it serves individuals to facilitate that themselves from the perspective of, we have to want something, right, in order for it to really benefit us. So I think there's like a tango that I think businesses really do need to make sure that they're supporting their teams, they're creating space. I think for me, this is subjectively speaking, the most important thing, I think, when it comes to meaningfully facilitating people's emotional wellness is allowing for a bit of flexibility. allowing for, people to be having an off day, allowing some inconsistency, allowing people to like be really on it one day, but then maybe not so much the other, because we are human. We're not built to robotically perform in the same way at the same time. But I think also we have to acknowledge that employers are not solely, entirely responsible. They are a huge part that can facilitate support. But also individuals, it really serves us as individuals, and I'm speaking subjectively from my own experience here, when we kind of take that initiative at the same time. So I think it's like a partnership. It is a co-creation, I think, rather than, I think, businesses feeling as though they have to be accountable. You have to create and facilitate support, but acknowledge that it's like a thing that you have to do together.
Yeah. And I think the COVID lockdowns and everything we've experienced over the last 18 months has really highlighted the importance of mental health as well, just generally. I think more time is being spent not just on like initiatives, but also on training for staff and getting people just talking about it. And I think it's important, like it's not just people who are working remotely, but people who are in the office as well. It's just as important. So it's more the approach, I guess, that differs.
I was on a call with some like management consultant leaders, so like big business corporates, with the leaders in those businesses. And I was on a call with them a couple of days ago. And one of the senior leaders, and perhaps one of the biggest consultancy firms in the world, said, well, and it was really well meaning, but said, okay, well, it's pretty much all done now, isn't it? So I guess we're all feeling a bit better. And I had this knee-jerk reaction because my experience has been the opposite. And I don't know if I'm alone in this, but last year, during lockdown, I was kind of like, I was in survival, I think. I was just like going, we were changing, we were adapting. I know that the team at Absolute, it was like this intense, fast-paced time where you had to get together. And so for me, 2020 was really about survival. It was about like going, just getting stuck in. And for me, 2021 has been much harder, mentally speaking. My anxiety has been way worse. And I think it's because as things have softened a little bit, as our economic stability feels slightly more stable than it did, I think I've experienced some psychological fallout now rather than last year. And I wonder whether I'm alone in that. I can't imagine I am, because I think a lot of us are in this like, oh, we've just got to survive and get through. And then when you're like that for a while and things start to normalize, that's when I think sometimes the exhaustion, the burnout, the stress can hit. And that's certainly been my experience.
Yeah, it was last year, the need to adapt, and there was not really a choice in the matter, was there? It was like, okay, so this is how we work now, fine. We're all locked down, we can't leave the house, that's just what we're going to do, no worries. Whereas now it's that choice, it's that we can go out again, like the way we're working can differ again, and everything has changed again. So yeah, I'm
we should feel good, we should be enjoying it, and it's not collective anymore. Maybe I'm just thinking aloud here, maybe that's what it is. When, the first kind of lockdowns, there was this sense of like being part of a collective, wasn't there? It was like we were all in the same boat together. Jack Black was making his sourdough, like we were all, I don't know why Jack Black.
That's where we all, banana bread.
But you had like celebrities and people all over the world like sharing us, all collectively going through a process. Whereas now I think it feels much more isolating, because I was actually doing a session today, again, for another big business about going hybrid. And it was so split down the middle. Some people were like, yes, let me back. Other people were like, I can't think of anything worse. So I think we've lost this sense of like collective trauma. And now we're just like isolated in our feelings a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, it is that argument of in office or remote. But we're not going to get into that today, because that could take us for another 2 hours. Oh, brilliant. So, okay, next question then. So, are there any tips on maximizing productivity of remote teams? And is that any different to what you would do in the office?
Yes. Okay, so I think it's so important that we know how humans are motivated. And there's lots of like science and research around how we are motivated as humans that we just don't kind of get taught. So basically, as humans, we have two neurological states. We have what's known as an away state, which is where like we are trying to avoid a potential bad thing. This is typically how people in businesses, especially agencies, motivate themselves. It's
Yeah.
like there is this bad thing here, this difficult thing here, and I need to avoid it. I need to avoid missing this deadline. I need to avoid letting the team down. Huge one in remote is people think I need to avoid looking lazy and people not trusting me. So we're always moving away from this negative. It works. It's super valid. But we also, but the problem with away state motivation is it can lead to panic, stress, burnout, overwhelm. It's also really inconsistent. So if anyone listening has really spiky motivation, like some days you're really on, then other days you're tired, then you're on, then you're tired, that'll be because you're motivating yourself through an away state. In other words, we motivate ourselves through fear. It works, we get shit done. But the problem with away state, like I said, is it's not sustainable. So then we have towards state motivation. And towards state motivation is when you're going towards something cool and exciting. I really believe that as managers and leaders, we really need to learn, and it's a skill, it is a skill, but we really need to learn how to motivate our teams exclusively through towards state rather than away state motivation when working remotely, and especially now because our whole lives have been away state motivation. So it's kind of the difference between thinking like, don't want to miss this deadline to it'll feel really good when I hit this deadline on time. It's kind of semantic, but there's a really brilliant book called I forgot which book it is. I'll try and remember, and then I don't know, I'll share it. That talks all about this and how leaders can motivate teams towards a positive rather than away from a negative. And I think if you do that, then you increase productivity, but in a meaningful and sustainable way, rather than someone panic working to hit a target.
Yeah. And how much of that is teams almost motivating themselves with the goals that they want to achieve as well? Is it more about that rather than leaders and managers turning around saying, okay, we want you to hit X percentage of retention rate every month, or we want you to upsell this amount? What is it about when employees set their own goals and their own objectives that really helps to motivate them?
Yeah, that's fine. And it's kind of like, it's really valid for us to have those like numerical based targets. We need them, but there has to be something inspiring and motivating above that. So actually the target itself, the percentage, just becomes the measure of the overarching goal. And the overarching goal has to be genuinely, actually emotionally inspiring for the individual. And I think that's where businesses fall down. And it's actually a really easy opportunity. Because if you can tap into what people actually want, emotionally speaking, we only ever do stuff to feel some feelings. We're not all working. We just work because we want to feel something. We want to feel valid. We want to feel successful. We want to feel like accomplished. So if you can create goals that genuinely, meaningfully tap into someone's emotions, and you can get people to keep referring back to that, then it increases motivation because you're motivating people by what they really want. And it's different for everybody. There is no rules on how people are motivated. It is really, really different for everyone. Some people are really financially driven. I am. Some people are more intrinsically driven. And I think it's for leaders working out how your team are motivated. Because I think the mistake businesses, I'm off on one here now, Sophie.
Go for it.
I think the mistake that businesses make is they assume that people are motivated in the same way. Because when it comes to like businesses working out how they're going to reward and motivate their teams, what tends to happen is like people at the top will go, right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this for the team and this for the team, and we'll filter it down. But maybe there's someone who's actually super, super motivated by money, right? So maybe you've got someone on the team who's like really motivated by finance. So motivate them through bonuses, schemes. Maybe there's someone on the team who's really motivated by a sense of like feeling as though they have status. So that kind of person would be like, right, we're going to get you speaking at conferences, we're going to put you out into the world. So it's different for everyone. And I think the biggest win a business can have is understanding their team as individuals and playing to that individual's motivations from an emotional perspective. It's all emotion.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that. Cool. So we've spoken a little bit about productivity, about motivation, all those kind of things. But what about recruitment? So is there a kind of a rule of thumb when it comes to recruiting and onboarding for remote roles? And is it harder to recruit the right candidates?
Yeah, I think it really is. I think it depends. I think you have to become so crystal clear on your culture, like really, really crystal clear. And that's very hard as well, because especially a lot of businesses that have gone remote, like, so what is a remote culture? How do you facilitate a remote culture? It's a very separate challenge. So I think the things that can make that process easier is becoming really crystal clear on your culture. And then what we want to be doing is we want to be hiring within people, you know, for people who align with those values. But there's a bit of a risk only hiring for cultural fit, because then we can create homogenous teams. But what we want to do is hire people who kind of create cultural add. And so there's those two things. So I think you have to really know I think people focus on specialisms when they're recruiting, whereas really you should be focusing on motivators again and drivers. And if you can build, say if you're a performance-based business and you can build a team of people who are financially motivated, it will fit. And so there can be like divergence within that. But if that underlying motivator kind of goes through, if you're a business that focuses more on like lifestyle and then you recruit within that, then I think that's when it gets easier. And I think this is the hard thing for businesses, to really get so clear on culture and not just hire for specialisms. And I think it's a difficult thing for us to do remotely.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, it's the same whether it's in person or remotely, because explaining your culture and things like that, and an interview is just one stage of it. And if I'm completely honest, I don't like interviews. I don't like set questions of interviews and things like that. And they're necessary because you need to understand a person's skill set and things like that. But what I love more than anything is just finding out who a person is just by generally having a conversation. And I think that's so much more important, to really gain that understanding of what motivates them. How can we really improve their productivity? Like, how do we fit together? Rather than just, oh, okay, you've got experience as a senior SEO or as a PR manager or whatever the job role is looking for. It's that, who are you and how do you fit with us and how can we fit with you?
Yeah, it's tough because you have to navigate that whilst at the same time. Yeah, it's really hard. I think it's one of the hardest things.
Yeah, definitely. But so important, because without the right team, then it's not going to go anywhere. So yeah, it's super, super important to get it right.
And I think that's ultimately why many minds ended in the end, because I was really struggling to find the right team, really struggling, because I was struggling to get creative working remotely. I really struggled with that.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, because I know there's been a lot of conversation, especially on Twitter and just generally online at the moment, about how to stay creative. And again, it's that motivation side of things when working remotely. But then at the same time, people say that actually sitting in group meetings, it's really hard to be creative, and actually people just need their own space. So sometimes that remote atmosphere and being able to just like stick yourself on do not disturb, it's just you and your kind of brain, I guess, coming up with all these ideas, specifically from a PR perspective as well. So there are benefits to it too.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I think, and like you said, like research has shown that we have better ideas individually because we can't generate, communicate, look at like non-verbal cues. We've all been in that brainstorm where we have that great idea and we're like, this is such a good idea, and then somebody else is talking, so we wait for them to finish, but then somebody else says something and the conversation's moved on and suddenly the idea doesn't seem valid. So like coming up with ideas and like brainstorms empirically hasn't been shown the best way to do it. So I think there's so much value in working individually when it comes to ideation. What I always struggled with, and maybe this is just I didn't figure it out, is the end-to-end process of going from creative idea to execution remotely. I would love to speak to some businesses that have nailed that, because I think it's so easy for ideas to become diluted from idea to the living thing. And so it's this process of dilution I found very hard, because we'd have these great ideas and then I would brief the developer and then the developer would brief the designer, and then there was this like chain, and it just really, we always moved away from the original idea. And because I'd only ever worked like in office environments, that didn't happen so much because you're there and you're talking. So I think I'd be so interested to talk to people who really nailed remote going from idea to execution without losing the purity and the essence of the original idea in the process. I think it's so tough. So if anyone has nailed it, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, and that sounds almost like one of the key challenges really for remote leaders is that communication. It's going from where you are to where you need it to be and not losing that value as you're going through. So would you say that's possibly the most challenging part about remote leadership?
I think so. It ends up a bit like Chinese whispers, I think, sometimes. And maybe that's a process challenge, and processes were never my forte. So I think this, like, sometimes, I ran a remote business because I really believe in giving people professional autonomy. Like, I really believe in that quite passionately. We do our best work when we feel in control of our own lives. We are adults. We are adults, and we like to be treated like adults. But I think it's so difficult to not lose that we're in the same room, we're doing it. And I think what's happened now is I think we've recalibrated. I think we've all got really
Yeah.
used to it collectively. I think we've all adjusted to what it feels like and looks like to work remotely.
Yeah. I think personally, working remotely, you lose that capacity for where you get that face to face communication. So you miss the socio emotional undertones. So
Mm,
you've got all those non-verbal cues like gestures, body position, and paralinguistic cues like tone, pitch, all of these different things that you would pick up on if you was talking to someone face to face and it wasn't just over an email and a message. But there's so many other ways that you can communicate when working remotely. It's just finding that balance.
yeah. And one of the things that I think is really important, this is a bit of a tangent, but it's been on my mind lately. I
Yeah, go
think,
for it.
so this comes up a lot because obviously I work in the confidence space a lot. And it comes up loads, and people are always a bit embarrassed and sheepish about it. The way we dress has an impact on how we feel. It just does. It just
Yeah.
does. And I think, like I will talk to people, and they'll be like, I feel more confident when I'm wearing, like, and we feel a bit embarrassed, like it shouldn't. And I think we're losing that a bit. I think we're losing that, like, when you kind of have that day and you like put your outfit on and you put your nice clothes on and then you go and get a coffee and you're like strutting through.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think, that, like, that joy of having a career. And I wonder, people who are joining and have just worked remotely so far, they don't know what that feels like, how good it can feel to like wake up in the morning, put on an outfit that makes you feel really fierce, go and get a coffee. I think it's so important for people's confidence. And that will obviously come with, like, that will come with, like, going to meetings and things.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a sad thing to lose. That, like, Carrie Bradshaw energy. It's ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? I think it's
I
important that we, like,
do.
get dressed up and feel fancy sometimes because it builds our confidence.
Yeah. And you know what? This is really funny that you should say this now because I've had a week a little bit like this. So I mean, working from home, been doing it for ages, like love my tracksuit bottoms. Can I fit into my jeans anymore? Who knows? But I will sit in like the most comfortable clothes because I feel comfortable. I'm still being super productive, no worries. But I had a really tough meeting this week and I was like, you know what? I need to dress up. I wasn't on camera or anything. I was like, I need to feel like the boss
Yes.
bitch that I want to be for this meeting. So I was like, right, let me get this blouse on, let me do my hair, let me get this makeup on, and all this kind of stuff. Because I think that it really matters whether you're on camera or not, because it is how you feel about it.
Yeah, and I wonder whether there's a difference to. It's interesting, but I feel as though comfort and power are very different emotions. So I don't think it's possible for us to feel comfortable and really power. I mean, we can feel comfortable and powerful at the same time, of course we can. But I definitely think there is something like you did in that act of being like, no, I am, like, because the way we really feel like we're good at our jobs, we have an idea in our head of what, like, really good people do, and we have to embody that idea. And often the way we stand, the way we present, the way we show up. And I coach a lot of leaders, and I was coaching a leader of a really, really big, successful agency the other day, and I was like, every time I see you, you're in just like a jumper and tracksuit
Mhm.
bottoms. Go shopping, buy yourself some really nice clothes. And they were like, okay. I think it's important. I think it is important, and I think we undervalue how important it is to feel that feeling of, like, feeling powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Ultimately, whether you're working remotely or in an office, the fundamentals of things like human behavior, the principles of leadership, the roles of leaders, the expectations of our output, all of these things haven't changed. You're just doing it all through Zoom now instead. So just getting shit done and getting it done well is the same, no matter whether you're on like Teams and you're doing it all remotely, or whether you're face to face with someone. And it's that how you kind of capture that, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Amazing. Cool. So one of our last questions. So do businesses need to restructure in order to run successfully remotely?
No, I think the main consideration if you want to run a remote team is you have to prioritize autonomy as the central core of the business, because it is. That has become the central core of the business, that people are autonomous in the sense that you don't necessarily have that visibility or control over what someone is doing at some time. And so I think we can really lean into that. We can lean into this, like, allowing, and that allowing can only come when we build the teams that we really trust. But I don't think people do need to restructure, but I think people need to shift their mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I remember when everyone first went into lockdown, and I was talking to quite a lot of people on this, because I think people reached out to me and were like, how do we do this? How do we do it?
Yeah.
And I was like, I basically gave up after a few years. I'm not the right person to ask, but I do have experience. So
I mean, it worked for a bit.
It worked for a bit. It totally worked for a bit, and it could have kept working, but I got tired. So people were reaching out to me going like, how do I do it? And I was like, the first rule of remote businesses is it's not just doing your job from a desk at home. It is fundamentally radically different. And I think it really is about leaning into this autonomy. And I also think what I really hope people can enjoy a bit more of now is, people would say to me like, oh, working from home is awful, Kirsty. I don't know how you've done it for so many years. And I was like, no, for so long we weren't working from home. We were working in isolation in a pandemic. That is way different. Mm-hmm. So I'll implore everyone now who maybe is working from home to go and work in that coffee shop, to go for walks, to go for runs, to really exercise that new freedom that you've got, to do a bit of yoga at 2 p.m. if that feels right, because that's where the value is. That's really where the value is. And for a long time, we couldn't do that. And so I think now, hopefully, remote teams can really start to flourish again, because we haven't been working remotely this whole time. We've been working in isolation this whole time in a pandemic. And only now, really, we're starting to truly work remotely, where maybe you can travel, maybe you can go swimming on your lunch break, maybe you can do all of these things that we just couldn't do before. So I really invite anyone to think of what you've experienced of remote working the past 18 months isn't a true reflection of what remote working is and can be.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely amazing. I was going to ask you for any other top tips, but I think you covered them there.
Awesome. Lovely.
Fantastic. So I don't know if anyone who is listening has any questions that you have for Kirsty at all.
How do people do that?
Yeah, apparently you can request to ask a question. Oh. Just wait and see if anyone's brave enough.
I noticed that Abs gave us 100% for the close thing.
Yeah. No, looks like no one's going to ask any questions today. So, Kirsty, thank you so much for joining us. It's been amazing, obviously discussing everything remote leadership and being an effective leader. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. We should definitely do this again. It was fun.
It is fun. Yeah, we'll do it again an hour later. Glasses of wine later. I think that would be. I could wax lyrical about this stuff all day.
In your pajamas this time though, no dressing up.
Yeah, I'll either be like comfortable or powerful. We'll see which mood I'm in.
We shall see.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining. I hope you really enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yes, thanks so much everyone for joining. Keep an eye on all of our socials, on the Absolute socials and on my social, for our next Twitter Spaces event coming up soon.
Cool. Thanks, Sophie.
Thanks so much. Speak
Bye.
soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.